All right, in this explainer, we're diving into a really powerful concept called the Associative Fog of War. It's this unsettling idea that in our modern age of information, having more data can sometimes lead to understanding a whole lot less.
So let's just start with the central puzzle here. I mean, think about it. We are living in an age with an unprecedented amount of data. We've got satellites, AI models, global sensor networks. Information is literally everywhere. So why, with all this supposed clarity, do major strategic miscalculations still happen? It's a huge paradox, and we're going to unpack it.
To really get to the heart of this modern problem, we first need to understand the classic military concept that it's named after, the good old fog of war.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely flips the script. The classical fog of war, the one the famous strategist Clausewitz described, was all about what you didn't know. It was a problem of scarcity, a deficit of data. But this new associative fog, it's the exact opposite. It's a problem of abundance, a surfeit of data. The issue isn't about not being able to see, it's about seeing so many connections that you end up misinterpreting what's actually there.
So how does this new fog even form? Well, it's not just random confusion. According to the source material, it's a very specific, reinforcing cycle with 3 distinct stages. Let's break down its anatomy.
The core mechanism here is a self-amplifying loop. It starts with this massive flood of information, which then gets filtered through pre-existing stories and beliefs. And finally, it hardens into a really dangerous overconfidence. You see, each step feeds directly into the next, creating this systemic failure of understanding.
First up, you have data density. Just try to picture modern intelligent systems for a second. The sheer volume of signals, images, and analytics they process it's staggering. They create this incredibly detailed map of connections, threats, and patterns that is just way too complex for any single person or even a whole team to fully comprehend. So what happens next? That incredibly dense map gets interpreted through what the source calls narrative reinforcement. You see, every large organization has its own stories, its core beliefs, things like our deterrence is credible or this is how our enemies think. When you're swimming in a sea of data, it's just human nature, and it's definitely institutional nature, to see the patterns that confirm those beliefs. So the flood of data doesn't challenge the story, it gets used to reinforce it.
And this brings us to the final and, frankly, the most dangerous stage: institutional hubris. The system, totally convinced by the sheer density of its own data and the coherence of its narrative, starts to believe it has achieved total clarity. It thinks it sees everything, and that's precisely when it becomes blind to its own blind spots, dismissing any evidence that doesn't fit the approved story.
So how does this fog actually get built in the real world? This isn't just some abstract theory. It's being accelerated by the very technologies we designed to make sense of all this data, which can inadvertently end up making the fog even thicker.
And this slide really shows how specific AI systems can become engines for this fog. The US military's JADC2, a system designed to connect every single sensor on the battlefield, creates that massive data saturation we talked about. You have Project Maven finding algorithmic correlations in drone footage. On the Israeli side, Hubsora automates target generation, while Lavender classifies people. Now, these aren't inherently good or bad. They are incredibly powerful tools that within this cycle can amplify the risk of associative fog.
So what happens when this cycle runs unchecked? What are the stakes? Well, the consequences can be catastrophic. The source paper uses a near-future case study to illustrate the danger of, as it calls it, mistaking the map for the territory.
And this quote just brilliantly illustrates the core problem. You can have the most detailed, data-rich, internally consistent picture of a situation in the entire world, but it's completely wrong. You've created a perfect, high-resolution map of a place that doesn't actually exist in the real world.
In the paper's 2026 case study, you had these Western models just filled with data, all suggesting that their adversaries would act like rational economists, be deterred by sanctions and military tech. But the actual reality of the adversaries was driven by completely different logics. Things like ideological belief, a willingness to endure pain, and a view of time that spans generations, not election cycles. The model couldn't see this, and so it made a fatal miscalculation.
This brings us to the final warning from the source material, which frames this not just as a tactical problem, but as a profound strategic paradox for our time.
This is such a powerful thought. The ultimate danger isn't a lack of missiles or money or data. It's when an institution's entire way of seeing the world, its interpretive system, becomes a closed loop, no longer connected to how things actually are. That's when the real trouble starts.
And this leads us to a deep and really unsettling paradox. The very institutions with the most advanced technology and analytical power are the ones most vulnerable to this associative fog. It suggests there's a tipping point where more data and analysis don't help. In fact, they actually begin to hurt, degrading true strategic understanding. Our greatest strength can become a potential weakness.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative question to think about. As we build ever more powerful AI to help us see the world, are we running the risk that these systems are just becoming better and better mirrors reflecting our own biases back at us, but with the illusion of objective truth? In an age of artificial intelligence, is our greatest blind spot simply our own way of thinking?